There are moments that cleave your life in two, the before and the after. For 16 years, my life was a seamless, sunlit landscape. I was Gideon Hayes, a man who had, by any measure, built a perfect world. The foundation was a love I thought was unshakable, a partnership with my wife, Lorelei. The walls were our home in the quiet suburbs of Chicago, a place we'd filled with IKEA furniture in our leaner years and later, with custom pieces that marked our success. The heart of it all, the laughter that echoed in the hallways, belonged to our children. Iris, my thoughtful, artistic 14-year-old, and Milo, my brilliant, boisterous 11-year-old son. 16 years, it's a lifetime. Long enough to know the scent of your wife's shampoo, the specific way she hums when she's concentrating, the little sigh she lets out just before falling asleep. It's long enough to build a history woven from shared jokes, family vacations to the Carolina coast, whispered promises in the dark, and the quiet comfort of knowing someone has your back, always. Or so he had believed. The after began on a Tuesday, October 17th. I remember the date because it was exactly 1 month until our 17th wedding anniversary. That evening, the house was preternaturally quiet. Lorelei was away on what she'd told me was a 3-day tech conference in Seattle, a trip essential for her role as a senior marketing director. The kids were having an overnight at my sister Naomi's house, a rare treat for them and, I had thought, for me, the silence was a luxury. I sat at our large kitchen island, the cool marble, a stark contrast to the warmth of the bourbon in my glass. I had closed a major deal for my consulting firm that afternoon, a victory that felt slightly hollow without Lorelei there to share it with. My plan was to surprise her. I'd spent an hour that evening browsing travel sites, my cursor hovering over boutique hotels in Aruba. I imagined her face, the way her eyes, the color of a summer sky, would light up when I showed her the tickets. I pictured us walking on a white sand beach, the stress of our demanding careers melting away under the Caribbean Sunday. It was a fantasy I held close, a reward for all our hard work. I swirled the amber liquid in my glass, the ice clinking softly. The house was a museum of our life together. On the fridge, a chaotic collage of Milo's soccer schedule, a doodle by Iris, and a photo of Lorelei and me from a decade ago, younger and more careless, our arms wrapped around each other at a street festival. On the mantle, school pictures stood in a neat line, chronicling the impossibly swift passage of our children from chubby-cheeked toddlers to the near adults they were becoming. Every object, every corner, was a testament to the life we had built. A good life, a real life. At 9:47 p.m., the doorbell rang. The sound was sharp, violent in the profound silence. I glanced at my watch, a frown creasing my brow. Who would be visiting at this hour? A package delivered late? A neighbor needing to borrow something? A cold knot tightened in my gut, a primal, inexplicable sense of dread. I walked to the front door and peered through the peephole. 2 figures, silhouetted by the porch light, police officers. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I thought of the kids, Naomi. Was there an accident? I fumbled with the lock, my fingers suddenly clumsy, and pulled the door open. They were a stark contrast. The taller one was older, with graying temples and eyes that held a deep, weary sadness. The younger one was stiff, his face a carefully blank mask. "Mr. Gideon Hayes?" the older officer asked. His voice was low, grave. "Yes," I replied, my own voice sounding thin, distant. "Is everything okay? My children, are they all right?" "Your children are fine, sir," he said, and a fraction of the pressure in my chest eased. But only a fraction. His eyes didn't soften. "I'm Officer Miller, and this is Officer Rodriguez. May we come inside? It's about your wife, Lorelei." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Lorelei? She was 3,000 miles away. What could have possibly happened that would bring 2 Chicago police officers to my doorstep? I stepped back wordlessly, letting them into the foyer. The familiar, comforting space suddenly felt alien, sterile under their official presence. They didn't remove their hats. "Please, what's happened?" I asked, my hands clenching and unclenching at my sides. Was there a problem with her flight? My mind raced, desperately searching for a logical, non-catastrophic explanation. Officer Miller exchanged a look with his partner. It was a glance that lasted only a second, but it was filled with something I would come to recognize intimately in the days that followed, a mixture of professional duty and human pity. It was the look of someone who held a terrible truth that you had yet to learn. "Mr. Hayes," he began, his tone gentle but firm, "your wife is at Northwestern Memorial Hospital." The words didn't compute. "Northwestern? That's impossible. She's in Seattle. Her conference is at the Bell Harbor International Conference Center. She flew out yesterday morning." I was reciting the details she had given me, as if their factual precision could somehow negate what he was saying. "Sir, we can confirm that your wife was not in Seattle," Officer Rodriguez, the younger one, said flatly. "She was found severely injured in a hotel room here in Chicago." "What?" The word was a choked whisper. My throat felt like it was closing up. "What hotel? What happened? Was she robbed?" "Sir, we believe it's best if you come to the hospital with us," Officer Miller interjected, steering the conversation away from my frantic questions. "The doctors can explain her condition in detail. There are other matters that need to be addressed." My mind was a maelstrom of confusion and terror. A hotel in Chicago, severely injured. None of it made sense, but the urgency in their voices was undeniable. I moved like an automaton, grabbing my keys from the hook by the door, my wallet from the counter. My hands were trembling, not from the cold, but from the adrenaline of pure, undiluted fear. The fear of the unknown. "I need to call my sister," I managed to say, pulling out my phone. "The kids are with her." I called Naomi. My voice was strained, and I struggled to keep it steady. "Now it's me. There's been an accident with Lorelei." "Oh my God, Gideon. What happened? Is she okay?" Her voice was sharp with alarm. "I don't have details yet. I'm on my way to the hospital now. Can you keep the kids overnight? Please don't tell them anything yet. Just say I was called into a work emergency." The lie felt like ash in my mouth. "Of course, Gid. Anything. Just call me as soon as you know something." I hung up and followed the officers out to their patrol car. They had me sit in the back, the plastic of the seat cold and unyielding. The drive downtown was a blur of streetlights and neon signs smearing across the rain-slicked windows. My world had shrunk to the rhythmic thump of the windshield wipers and the frantic beating of my own heart. What hotel? Why had she lied about being in Seattle? Was she going to be okay? The questions circled endlessly, each one more terrifying than the last. As we pulled into the emergency bay of the hospital, the stark, antiseptic smell of the place hit me before the doors even opened. I felt a tremor run through me, a premonition that I was about to walk into a new chapter of my life, one that was dark and terrifying and utterly unwanted. We rode the elevator up to the 4th floor in silence. The cheerful music playing overhead was a grotesque counterpoint to the dread coiling in my stomach. Just before the doors dinged open, I turned to Officer Miller, my voice barely audible. "Do you know what happened to her? Please, just tell me." "Oh." He cleared his throat, his gaze fixed on the floor numbers above the door. "There was an altercation at the Lakefront Hotel. She was in a room registered under another name. The incident was with a man she was with." The words struck me with the force of a physical blow. A man she was with, not a colleague, not a client. The phrasing was deliberate, intimate. The elevator doors slid open, revealing a brightly lit, sterile hallway. Officer Miller gestured for me to step out. And in the sterile silence of that hospital corridor, the world I knew, the perfect, sunlit world I had so carefully built, ceased to exist. The after had begun. A nurse intercepted us before we had taken 3 steps. Her expression, a well-practiced blend of sympathy and efficiency. "Mr. Hayes, I'm Sarah. Dr. Sharma will be with you in a moment. We've taken your wife to a private consultation room down the hall." "Oh." She led us to a small, windowless room furnished with 2 uncomfortable-looking chairs and a small table. It felt less like a place for consultation and more like a room for delivering bad news. The officers remained in the hallway, giving me a semblance of privacy that felt like a mockery. I sat, my body rigid, and waited. Every second stretched into an eternity, filled with the distant, muffled sounds of the hospital, a coded page, the soft squeak of rubber-soled shoes, a faint, disembodied cough. A woman in her 50s with tired, intelligent eyes in a white coat entered the room. "Mr. Hayes, I'm Dr. Anya Sharma." Her voice was calm, a steady anchor in my swirling sea of panic. "I'm the attending physician who treated your wife." I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady. "How is she?" "Is she?" "She's stable," Dr. Sharma said, cutting through my stammered question. "She has multiple contusions, a fractured ulna in her left wrist, and a moderate concussion. The injuries are serious, but they are not life-threatening. We have her sedated, and she's resting comfortably." A wave of relief so profound it almost buckled my knees washed over me. Not life-threatening, the three most beautiful words in the English language. For a fleeting moment, that was all that mattered. She was alive. "Thank God," I breathed, sinking back into the chair. "What happened? Was it a mugging? Did someone break into her hotel room?" Dr. Sharma's professional calm faltered for just an instant. That look again. The same one the police officer had given me. Pity, discomfort. "Mr. Hayes, the police will need to discuss the specific circumstances of the incident with you. Detective Harding is waiting outside to speak with you." "Oh." She gave me a small, sad smile and left. The relief I had felt moments before evaporated, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. The doctor's job was to fix the body. It was the detective's job to dissect the life. Detective Harding was a stocky man with a close-cropped beard and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He had the weary posture of a man who had seen the worst of human nature too many times. He closed the door behind him, and the small room suddenly felt suffocating. "Mr. Hayes, please sit," he said, his voice a low gravel. He didn't sit himself, instead leaning against the door as if to block any escape. "I need to ask you some questions." I nodded, my throat dry. "Your wife, Lorelei, was found in a room at the Lakefront Hotel. She was registered there with a man named Preston Thorne. Do you know him?" The name hung in the air between us. Preston Thorne. Of course I knew him. He was Lorelei's boss, the charismatic, silver-haired senior vice president at Sterling Marketing Group. I'd met him a half-dozen times at holiday parties and company picnics. I had shaken his hand. I had shared drinks with him. I had listened to Lorelei complain for months about his micromanaging style and his demanding expectations. He's her boss," I said, the words feeling thick and clumsy in my mouth. My mind was struggling to process the information, trying to force it into a shape that made sense. Maybe they were having a late meeting. Maybe they were working on a confidential project. The rationalizations were flimsy, pathetic even to my own ears. Detective Harding's expression remained impassive. "According to the hotel staff, your wife and Mr. Thorne have been regular guests for the past several months." Ugh. The words were spoken without emotion. A simple statement of fact, but they landed like punches. Regular guests. Several months. "They checked in almost every Tuesday and Thursday evening," the detective continued, his voice relentless. "Tuesday and Thursday evenings. The nights Lorelei had her late client dinners. The nights she came home exhausted, telling me about the demanding deadlines and the pressure from her unreasonable boss, Preston. The nights I would have dinner waiting for her. The nights I would help Milo with his science project while telling him Mom was working hard so they could have nice things. The carefully constructed narrative of my life was dissolving before my very eyes. "What happened to her?" I managed to ask, my voice a strangled rasp. "From what we've pieced together, she and Mr. Thorne had a violent altercation. He claims she confronted him, and he lost control. A guest in the adjacent room heard screaming and the sound of furniture being thrown and called security. When they arrived, Mr. Thorne was attempting to leave. Your wife was on the floor. He is in custody, being charged with aggravated assault." I sat perfectly still, feeling the blood drain from my face. My mind was no longer searching for rationalizations. It was a torrent of memories, all of them now poisoned, recontextualized by this new horrific truth. The sudden work trips on weekends. The new expensive lingerie I had found in her drawer but had never seen her wear. The way she angled her phone away from me when a text came through. The declining intimacy between us, which I, like a fool, had blamed on our busy schedules and the natural erosion of time. I had been living in a beautifully furnished house with a stranger, a complete and utter blind fool. "Can I see her?" I asked, interrupting whatever the detective was saying. My voice was hollow. He nodded. "She's in room 412. But Mr. Hayes," he paused, choosing his words with care. "You should be aware, she doesn't know we've contacted you yet." When she was coherent enough to speak, the only emergency contact she provided was her sister's name, Cassandra. Another knife, twisted expertly in the wound. Even in a moment of crisis, her first instinct had been to protect her secret, to keep me in the dark. I walked to room 412 inches, a state of emotional numbness. The world outside my head had faded to a dull hum. I was aware of the squeak of my shoes, the smell of disinfectant, but none of it felt real. I pushed open the door to her room, and the sight that greeted me almost made me stagger backward. Lorelei's face was a swollen, bruised mask. Her left eye was completely closed, a grotesque purple bloom on her pale skin. Her left wrist was encased in a thick plaster cast, resting on a pillow. An IV line snaked into her right arm, and the soft, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room. This woman, this battered stranger, was my wife, the mother of my children, the person I had trusted more than anyone in the world. I stood by the door for a long time, just watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest. A war raged within me. Part of me wanted to scream, to shake her awake, and demand answers. Another part wanted to turn and walk out, to erase the last 16 years and never look back. But the largest part of me, the part that was still a husband and a partner, felt a gut-wrenching need to understand how we had come to this. How our life, our entire history, could have been such a complete and elaborate lie. She stirred, a soft moan escaping her lips. Her good eye fluttered open. It took a moment to focus, and then it found me, standing in the shadows by the door. Shock widened it, quickly followed by the shimmer of tears. "Gideon," she whispered, her voice hoarse and broken. "Oh God, I'm so sorry." I stepped forward, stopping at the foot of her bed, keeping a careful distance. My heart felt like a block of ice in my chest. "Sorry for which part, Lorelei?" I asked, my voice devoid of the warmth she had known for 16 years. "For cheating on me for months? For lying to my face about where you were? Or for getting caught?" She flinched as if I had struck her. "Please, Gideon, it's not what you think." A harsh, bitter laugh escaped my lips. The sound surprised even me. "Really? Because I think you've been sleeping with your boss while I was at home with our children. I think you've been betraying our marriage, our family, and every promise we ever made to each other. So please, enlighten me. What part of that have I misunderstood?" Tears streamed down her bruised cheek. "I made a terrible mistake. I got caught up in something. I never meant for it to happen. But I love you and the kids more than anything. Preston means nothing to me." "He meant enough for you to risk our entire life," I countered, my voice dangerously steady. "He meant enough for you to look me in the eye and lie, over and over again. He meant enough for you to create this entire second life while I was at home, being a husband and a father." She tried to reach for me with her good hand, but I took a step back, out of her reach. "Gideon, please. I know I've hurt you, but things between us had become so routine, so predictable. Preston, he made me feel special, desired." "Stop." I cut her off, a wave of nausea rolling through me. Don't you dare blame this on our marriage. If you were unhappy, you could have talked to me. We could have gone to counseling. You could have left me. You had 1,000 honest options before you chose to do this." "He hurt me, Gideon," she whispered, gesturing feebly to her injuries, her eyes pleading. "When I told him I was ending it, that I couldn't do this to you and the kids anymore, he just lost control. Doesn't that show you I was trying to make it right?" I looked at her. This woman I had once believed I knew better than I knew myself. She was trying to spin a new lie, even now. Trying to paint herself as a martyr who was injured while trying to reclaim her virtue. But the detective's words echoed in my head. A violent altercation. It wasn't the story of a woman trying to escape. It was the story of two people caught in the toxic web they had woven. I turned to leave. Gideon, wait. Her voice was panicked. Where are you going? Please, don't tell the kids. Please, let me come home. We can fix this. We can work through this together. I paused in the doorway, my back to her. They deserve better than lies, Lorelei, I said, my voice cold and final. So do I. I walked out of the room, past the nurse's station, and into the elevator, leaving the rhythmic beeping of her heart monitor behind me. I couldn't go home. Not to the house where every photograph on the wall now felt like a prop in a long-running play, where I was the only one who didn't know my lines. Instead, I went to a 24-hour diner across the street from the hospital and ordered a cup of black coffee I knew I wouldn't drink. As the city slept and the hours stretched into the bleak gray dawn, I sat in a vinyl booth and stared into the dark liquid. And in the ruins of my perfect life, I made 3 decisions that would become the new foundation for whatever came next. First, I would not break down. Not now, not ever. Lorelei had taken enough from me. She would not take my dignity. Second, I would protect my children from as much of this ugliness as possible. But I would never, ever lie to them. They deserved the truth, delivered with care, but without deception. Their world had been built on a lie. I would rebuild it on a foundation of absolute honesty. Third, I would find out everything, every secret, every deception. And then, armed with the complete, unvarnished truth, I would rebuild my life and emerge from this wreckage stronger, with or without forgiveness in my heart. By morning, when the first rays of sun cut through the city smog, the shock had been replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I was no longer a husband in pain. I was a man with a plan. The drive home from the diner was the longest of my life. The sun was rising, casting a sickly, pale light over a city I no longer recognized. My home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage set for a tragedy. I had promised myself I would build our new reality on a foundation of honesty, and the first, most brutal test of that vow was waiting for me behind the front door. Naomi met me in the foyer. She had been waiting up. One look at my face, and the question in her eyes died. She simply pulled me into a hug, her arms a brief, warm anchor. "They're in the living room," she whispered. "I told them you were working late on something big. How bad is it, Gid?" "Worse than you can imagine," I said, my voice rough with exhaustion. Can you give us a few minutes?" She squeezed my shoulder, her eyes full of a sorrow she didn't yet understand, and quietly slipped out the back door. I found them on the couch, curled together under an Afghan, watching cartoons with the volume turned low. Their faces, still soft with the innocence of childhood, lit up when they saw me. "Dad, you're home!" Milo scrambled up and ran to me, wrapping his arms around my waist. Iris followed, her hug more hesitant, her perceptive eyes already scanning my face for trouble. "Hey guys," I said, my heart feeling like a lead weight. I hugged them both tightly, burying my face in their hair, trying to draw strength from them. "Turn off the TV, we need to talk." They sat back down, their earlier cheerfulness evaporating into an anxious silence. I sat opposite them in the armchair, leaning forward, my hands clasped between my knees. I took a deep breath. "Mom is in the hospital," I began, choosing my words with surgical precision. "Physically, she's going to be okay. She has some injuries, a broken wrist, some bruises, and a concussion, but the doctors say she will recover." Relief washed over their faces, a visible loosening of their small shoulders. But they could sense there was more. "There's something else I need to tell you, and it's going to be very hard to hear," I continued, my own heart breaking for the pain I was about to inflict. "The reason Mom is in the hospital is complicated. She wasn't in Seattle like she told us." Iris's brow furrowed. Milo just looked confused. "She was in a hotel here in Chicago," I said, forcing myself to meet their eyes. "She was with another man, someone from her work. They had been seeing each other secretly for some time." Iris's face crumpled instantly, as if she'd been struck. A silent tear traced a path down her cheek. Milo's confusion hardened into something else, a look of fierce, premature anger that no 11-year-old should ever have to wear. "You mean she was cheating on you?" he demanded, his voice cracking on the last word. The bluntness of it was a mercy. I nodded, my throat tight. Yes. And this man hurt her when they had a fight. So she was lying to all of us? Iris asked, her voice small and wounded. All those nights she worked late? The trips? It seems that way, sweetheart, I replied, my own emotions a raging inferno I had to keep banked for their sake. I hate her, Milo declared suddenly, his small body rigid with fury. He jumped to his feet. I hate her for doing this to you. To us. I reached out and gently pulled him back to the couch, placing a hand on his shoulder. Milo, listen to me. It's okay to be angry. I'm angry too. But hate is a heavy thing to carry. Your mom made some terrible, terrible choices. But she's still your mom, and I know she still loves you both very much. Will you forgive her? Iris asked, her tear-filled eyes searching mine for an answer, for a map back to the world we had lost. Will things go back to normal? The question was a gut punch. I could have lied. I could have given them the comforting falsehood that everything would be fine. But I had made a promise to myself in that lonely diner. No more lies. I don't know what will happen between your mom and me, I said honestly, the words tasting like metal. I don't think things can ever go back to the way they were. But I do know two things for certain. First, none of this is your fault. Not one single bit of it. Do you understand? They both nodded, their eyes wide. And second, I continued, my voice thick with emotion. No matter what happens, I will always be here for you. We are going to get through this. Together. Milo threw his arms around my neck, burying his face in my chest, his small body shaking with sobs. Iris joined the embrace, and we sat there, a broken, huddled trio on the living room couch, as the morning sun streamed in through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, indifferent to the fact that our world had shattered. That night, after they had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep, I sat alone in my home office with a glass and a bottle of expensive bourbon Lorelei had given me for my last birthday. I poured a generous amount, the amber liquid catching the light. I thought about how easy it would be to drown the pain, to numb the rage, to simply fall apart. But then I thought of Iris's silent tears and Milo's furious, heartbroken face. They didn't need a father who was falling apart. They needed a father who was a rock. I walked to the kitchen and poured the entire glass of bourbon down the sink, the scent of oak and vanilla filling the air like a bitter perfume. And I made another decision. I would not be a passive victim in this tragedy. I would find out everything. No more surprises, no more blind spots. I needed the complete, unvarnished truth if I was ever going to lead my family out of this darkness. The next morning I called Silas Blackwood. He was a private investigator a client had once recommended, a man known for his discretion and his ruthless efficiency. I was blunt. My wife has been having an affair, I said, dispensing with pleasantries. I need to know everything, how long it's been going on, where they went, what they did, who knew about it. I need hard evidence, not suspicions. Silas didn't ask why. He didn't offer a single word of sympathy. He simply said, I'll need some basic information and a retainer. I can be at your office in an hour. 3 days later, while Lorelei was still in the hospital, leaving a string of tearful, pleading voicemails on my phone that I refused to answer, Silas delivered his first report. We met in a sterile conference room at my firm. He slid a thick manila folder across the polished table. The affair with Preston Thorne had been going on for 7 months. Not several months, as the detective had vaguely put it. 7. The evidence was meticulous, clinical, and utterly devastating. There were copies of credit card statements showing charges for rooms at the Lakefront Hotel and also at his apartment in Lincoln Park. There were restaurant receipts for intimate dinners, for 2 at places I'd wanted to take Lorelei for years. There were flight records for a weekend trip they had taken to New York, a trip Lorelei had told me was a mandatory marketing retreat in Philadelphia. Then came the photographs. My breath hitched. There they were, entering the hotel together, Lorelei's hand resting on the small of Preston's back. There they were, holding hands in a park I didn't recognize, laughing at something he had said. And the final one, a grainy shot taken in the parking garage of her office building, showed them kissing in his car, a passionate, desperate kiss that stole the air from my lungs. Each image was a separate, calculated betrayal. I forced myself to look at every single one. This was the reality I had refused to see. "There's more," Silas said, his voice a low monotone. "Do you want to know everything?" I nodded, my jaw tight, bracing myself. This wasn't Thorne's first workplace affair. He has a history. At his last two companies, there were rumors, quiet settlements. He likes to pursue married women. He finds it a challenge. The information should have made me feel better, knowing Lorelei had fallen prey to a predator. Instead, it only made me feel worse. Had she been so easily seduced? Had our 16 years of history meant so little? "There's one last thing," Silas continued, looking at me directly for the first time. "The night of the incident, she wasn't ending the relationship. My source, a bartender at the hotel lounge, overheard them arguing before they went upstairs. She was furious because she had found out Thorne was seeing someone else, a new junior account executive at her company. The revelation landed like a physical blow, knocking the last bit of air from my body. The story she had told me in the hospital, the one where she was the brave wife trying to end it for her family, was a lie. All of it. She hadn't been injured trying to do the right thing. She'd been injured during a lover's quarrel because her lover was cheating on her. The hypocrisy was so staggering, it was almost comical. I thanked Silas, paid his invoice, and told him to keep digging. I wanted to know every lie, every deception, every person who might have known and said nothing. That afternoon, Lorelei's sister, Cassandra, showed up at my door unannounced. Her face was a storm cloud of anger and accusation. "Gideon, we need to talk," she said, attempting to push past me into the house. I stood firm, blocking her entry. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it here on the porch." Her eyes narrowed. "Lorelei is being discharged tomorrow. She needs to come home, to her family, to heal." "This isn't her home anymore," I replied, my voice calm and cold as ice. Cassandra's face flushed. "You can't be serious. After 16 years, you're just throwing her away because of one mistake?" I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "One mistake? Cassandra, she had a 7-month affair. She told hundreds of lies to me and our children. That's not a mistake. That's a campaign of deliberate choices. People make bad decisions when they're unhappy," she countered, her voice rising. "Maybe if you had paid more attention to her, maybe if you weren't always so focused on work." "Stop. Right there." I cut her off, my voice dropping dangerously low. "Don't you dare try to shift the blame for her actions onto me. Lorelei is a grown woman who made her own choices. She loves you, Gideon. And what about the kids? They need their mother. They need truth and stability, both of which she shattered," I retorted. "And I won't force them to live in a house built on lies." "You've always been cold, Gideon," she spat, her words dripping with venom. "Always so logical and controlled. Maybe that's why she looked elsewhere, for someone with some actual passion." The accusation stung, a flicker of the old insecurity she knew how to exploit. But then I remembered the photographs in Silas's folder, the cold, hard evidence of Lorelei's calculated deception. My resolve hardened into steel. "You should go, Cassandra," I said, my voice final. "And you can tell Lorelei she can stay with you while we figure out the next steps. Legally." Her eyes widened at the last word. "Legally? You're already talking to lawyers?" "I will be," I confirmed. "And I suggest she do the same." As she stormed away, I stood on the porch, the cool autumn air doing nothing to quell the fire in my veins. The lines had been drawn. This was no longer just about a broken heart. It was about to become a war. And it was a war I had every intention of winning. The days that followed were a blur of grim necessities. I met with Arthur Vance, an attorney whose calm demeanor belied a reputation as a bulldog in the courtroom. He listened to my story without interruption, his face a mask of professional neutrality as I laid out the sordid details, supported by Silas Blackwood's meticulously organized file. "The evidence is overwhelming, Gideon," Arthur said when I finished, his voice steady. "Her infidelity, the element of endangerment with the assault, and her attempt to deceive you about the circumstances it all builds. A strong case. But I have to warn you, divorce is never clean. It's a war of attrition. She will fight back." I'm not looking for clean, I told him. I'm looking for what's right for my children. Following Arthur's counsel, I began the process of disentangling our lives. I froze our joint accounts, moving half the funds into a separate account under my name. I had the locks on the house changed, an act that felt both necessary and profoundly sad. I sent a carefully worded email to the principal at the kids' school, informing them of a difficult family situation and asking them to be vigilant for any behavioral changes. Each action was a nail in the coffin of my 16-year marriage. The day after Lorelei was discharged from the hospital, she came to the house. I saw her pull up in Cassandra's car, and my stomach clenched. I had told the kids she would be coming by to pick up some things while they were at school, a sanitized version of the truth to protect them from the ugliness of the confrontation I knew was coming. I met her on the porch. The bruises on her face had started to fade into sickly yellow and green patterns. Her left arm was still in a cast, a stark, white symbol of her lies. She looked smaller, more fragile than I had ever seen her. A part of me, the husband I had been for 16 years, felt a pang of sympathy, but it was quickly extinguished by the cold fire of my resolve. I need to get some of my things, she said, her voice small, avoiding my eyes. I've already packed a suitcase for you, I replied, my tone even. I nodded toward the large suitcase standing by the door. Clothes, toiletries, personal items. Anything else you need, you can request through your attorney. This is Arthur Vance's card. He's my lawyer. Her face crumpled. The fragility was gone, replaced by a desperate pleading look. Gideon, please. Don't do this. Can't we at least talk? I made a terrible, horrible mistake, but I love you. I love our family. We can get through this. People do it all the time. There is no we anymore, Lorelei, I said, surprised by my own calmness. You destroyed that over 7 months of calculated deception. It wasn't calculated, she insisted, her voice rising. It just happened. And marriages survive this. For better or for worse, remember? That was our vow. The vows also included fidelity and honesty, I pointed out, my voice hardening. Vows you discarded every Tuesday and Thursday for the better part of a year. It's not just the affair, Lorelei. It's the sheer scale of the lies. It's the fact that you were sleeping with your boss while complaining to me about him. It's the trips you took with him while I was at home with our children, believing you were working. It's the fact that you weren't even trying to end things with him. You were fighting because he was cheating on you. Her eyes widened in genuine shock. How? How could you possibly know that? I know everything, I interrupted, my voice sharp as broken glass. Every hotel, every trip, every lie. And I know you only got caught because your lover found a new toy and you couldn't handle it. Tears streamed down her face, but they no longer moved me. They were just another tool in her arsenal of manipulation. That's not true. I was ending it. I told him it was over. Stop lying, I said, the words a low growl. Even now, even when you've been caught red-handed, you're still lying. To me, and to yourself. She shifted tactics, her voice taking on a desperate edge. The kids, Iris and Milo, they need me. You can't keep me from my children, Gideon. The law won't let you. I'm not keeping you from them, I said. But Milo doesn't want to see you right now. And Iris is confused and hurt. When they're ready, we will arrange visits. But it will be on their terms, not yours. She stared at me, her expression hardening into something resentful. You've turned them against me. No, Lorelei, I said, my voice weary. You did that all by yourself, the moment you decided your affair was more important than their trust. And so, before she could respond, a sleek black sedan pulled into the driveway behind Cassandra's car. My blood ran cold as the driver's side door opened and Preston Thorne stepped out. He looked uncomfortable but determined, his handsome face marred by a faint bruise on his cheekbone. This was him, the man who had been sleeping with my wife, the man whose hands had been on her body, the man who had shared secrets and laughter in moments that should have been mine. This was also the man who had beaten her badly enough to put her in the hospital. What the hell is he doing here? I demanded, instinctively taking a step forward, placing myself between Lorelei and him. I asked him to come, Lorelei admitted, her voice a near whisper. I thought if we both talked to you, We could explain things. Explain things? I echoed, my voice dripping with incredulous fury. What could he possibly explain that would make a shred of difference? Preston approached, his hands raised slightly in a placating gesture. Mr. Hayes, Gideon, I know you have every reason in the world to hate me. You're damn right I do. I cut him off, the rage I had kept so tightly coiled beginning to unfurl. You slept with my wife for 7 months. You helped her lie to me and my children. And then you beat her when things didn't go your way. Give me one good reason why I shouldn't put you in the hospital right now. He flinched. It wasn't like that. I never meant to hurt her. Things just escalated. Things escalated, I repeated flatly. That's your explanation for fracturing my wife's wrist and giving her a concussion. Gideon, please, Lorelei interjected, stepping beside him. We're just trying to make things right. I looked at them, standing there together on my front lawn. The abuser and his victim, united. A sudden, sickening realization dawned on me. You're back together, aren't you? The question was quiet, but it landed with the force of a bomb. After everything, after he put you in the hospital, you've taken him back. Lorelei's silence was all the confirmation I needed. I laughed. A bitter, broken sound that seemed to surprise all three of us. It was the laugh of a man who had seen the absolute depths of absurdity. Unbelievable, I choked out. You know what? You deserve each other. Two liars, two cheats playing games with people's lives. Preston's face darkened. He took a step forward, his body tensing. Look, I love Lorelei. What happened between us was wrong, the affair, not just the fight. We know that, but we want to move forward, honestly now. Honestly, I repeated, the word tasting like poison. You wouldn't recognize honesty if it slapped you in the face, which, by the way, is exactly what I'm restraining myself from doing right now. One. Something inside me snapped. The carefully constructed walls of my control, the promises I had made to myself in that lonely diner, all of it crumbled into dust. Before I could process the thought, my fist connected with his jaw. The crack of bone on bone was sharp and satisfying. A jolt of white-hot pain shot up my arm, but it was nothing compared to the primal satisfaction of seeing him stagger backward and fall onto my manicured lawn. He lay there for a moment, stunned. Get off my property, I said, my voice deadly calm. Both of you. Preston scrambled to his feet, holding his jaw, a look of shocked fury on his face. For a moment, I thought he might retaliate, but Lorelei grabbed his arm. Preston, let's just go. This isn't helping. I turned my gaze to Lorelei. I'm still the mother of your children, she said, a note of defiance in her voice. You can't just erase me. I never said I would, I replied, my voice hard as stone. But you need to understand something. This little reconciliation you've staged here, it changes nothing. I'm still filing for divorce. I'm still seeking primary custody. And I am still going to make sure that everyone, the courts, our friends, our families knows exactly what kind of people you are. I went inside and slammed the door, the sound echoing the final, violent closing of a chapter of my life. Through the window, I watched as Lorelei grabbed her suitcase, said something angry to Preston, and then got into his car. They drove away, leaving me alone in the house that had once been our home. The storm had broken, and I was left standing in the wreckage. But as the adrenaline faded, a new feeling took its place. It wasn't despair. It was clarity. A cold, hard, and absolute clarity. I knew who my enemies were, and I knew exactly what I had to do. The punch was a turning point. It was a raw, primal act that broke through the veneer of controlled logic I had so carefully constructed. For Arthur Vance, it was a liability. For me, it was a necessary catharsis. The war had moved from a cold, strategic battle of lawyers and evidence to something visceral and real. And the call from Tessa Reed, the former colleague of Lorelei's, had given me the weapon I needed to escalate it. Armed with Tessa's sworn affidavit, Arthur added a new dimension to our lawsuit. We were no longer just pursuing a divorce. We were targeting Sterling Marketing Group and its CEO, Mr. Davenport, for gross negligence. The affidavit was damning. It detailed how the company's HR department had flagged Preston Thorne's history during his background check, specifically noting a pattern of inappropriate relationships with subordinates. It stated that Mr. Davenport had personally overridden their concerns, telling them to ignore the red flags because Thorne was bringing a lucrative pharmaceutical client with him. He had knowingly unleashed a predator into his workplace. The effect was instantaneous. The moment Sterling Marketing was served, their high-priced corporate lawyers called Arthur. They wanted to settle. Fast. The prospect of a public lawsuit detailing their toxic corporate culture and predatory management was a PR nightmare they would pay anything to avoid. The settlement they offered was substantial. It was more than a financial windfall. It was a vindication. It was a corporate admission of guilt, an acknowledgement that their negligence had played a direct role in the demolition of my family. After a long discussion with Arthur, I accepted the offer, contingent on one non-negotiable term: Preston Thorne's immediate termination for violating the company's code of conduct. They agreed without hesitation. To them, he was now just a liability to be discarded. News travels fast in the corporate world. 2 days after the settlement was signed, I received a frantic, tearful call from Lorelei. "How could you do this?" she shrieked into the phone, her voice thick with a combination of rage and panic. "Sterling fired Preston because of your lawsuit. They said he's a reputational risk." "Actions have consequences, Lorelei," I replied, my voice chillingly calm. "His, yours, and the company's. You're systematically destroying my life," she accused, her voice cracking with hysteria. "First our marriage, then my relationship with my children, now my career and Preston's." End of quote. The accusation was so profoundly detached from reality that I actually laughed. It was the same bitter, broken laugh from the day I'd punched her lover on my lawn. "Lorelei, listen to yourself," I said, the last vestiges of pity I held for her evaporating. "You destroyed our marriage with your affair. You damaged your relationship with the children by betraying their trust. You put your career at risk by sleeping with your boss. I didn't do any of that. You did. This isn't me destroying your life. This is you finally facing the bill for the choices you made." "You never loved me," she said, her voice turning to venom. "Not really. If you had, you would have fought for our marriage instead of fighting to tear it all down." "I loved you more than you will ever know," I corrected her, my voice steady despite the old wound her words pricked. "I loved the woman I thought you were, the partner I built a life with, but that person either never existed or she died somewhere along the way. And I respect myself and my children too much to fight for a lie." I hung up, a strange sense of finality washing over me. Her complete inability to take responsibility, her instinct to always cast herself as the victim, confirmed that I had made the only possible choice. The custody battle, which I had dreaded, ended not with a bang, but with a whimper. Faced with Silas Blackwood's file, the testimony of the court-appointed child advocate who had interviewed Iris and Milo, and the new, damning context of her ongoing relationship with the man who had assaulted her, Lorelei's attorney advised her to accept our terms. The court granted me primary physical custody. Lorelei would have the children every other weekend and one evening per week for dinner. On the day the divorce was finalized, I sat in the sterile courtroom and watched her sign the papers. Her face was a mask of weary resignation. Preston Thorne was not there. As Silas had predicted, their relationship, built on the flimsy foundations of deceit and shared narcissism, had crumbled the moment the pressure was applied and his career was stripped away. As we left the courthouse, two strangers legally unbound, she approached me one last time. "I know you won't believe me," she said, her eyes hollow, "but I am sorry, Gideon, for all of it." I looked at her, this woman who had once been the center of my universe, and felt a complex swirl of emotions: anger, sadness, and above all, a profound, bone-deep weariness. "I believe that you're sorry it ended this way," I replied, the distinction crucial. "But I'm not sure you're truly sorry for the choices that led us here." She didn't argue. It was perhaps the most honest moment she had given me in months. In the weeks that followed, Lorelei began to spiral. Without Preston, without her job, and with only limited court-mandated access to her children, the scaffolding that had held up her life was gone. She began drinking heavily. Cassandra would call me in a panic, describing empty bottles of vodka and days Lorelei spent in a drunken stupor. Twice, she showed up for her scheduled visits with the kids reeking of alcohol, her eyes glassy and unfocused. Both times, I had to do the excruciatingly painful thing of turning her away at the door, with Iris and Milo watching from the window. The confusion and hurt in their eyes was a fresh wound every time. Milo's anger hardened into a quiet, simmering resentment. Iris just grew quieter, retreating further into herself. One night, about 2 months after the divorce was finalized, I received a call from Cassandra. Her voice was strained, tight with fear. "Gideon, I'm worried. I'm really worried about Lorelei," she said. "She's not just drinking anymore. She's talking. Talking about how she's ruined everything, how she has nothing left to live for." Despite everything, a knot of cold concern tightened in my chest. Has she threatened to hurt herself? Not in so many words, but she's in a dark place. A really dark place. I think she needs professional help. I sighed, the weight of the world on my shoulders. I'll call her therapist, the one the court assigned. Maybe they can recommend an intervention or an inpatient program. "She needs more than a therapist, Gideon," Cassandra insisted, her voice breaking. "She needs her family. She needs to know she hasn't lost everything." "I can't give her what she wants, Cassandra," I said, my voice tired but firm. "I can't undo the divorce. I can't pretend the affair never happened." "You don't have to take her back to show some compassion," she snapped. "If something happens to her, Gideon, how will you ever explain that to your children?" The accusation was a low blow, a manipulation born of her own fear and guilt. "Don't put that on me," I said, my voice turning to ice. "Lorelei is an adult, responsible for her own choices and her own mental health. I will reach out to her therapist. But that's all I can do." I did call Dr. Matthews, who thanked me for the information and promised to follow up immediately. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought she would get the help she so desperately needed. 3 days later, at 2:17 a.m., my doorbell rang. I stumbled downstairs, my mind foggy with sleep, a disoriented sense of déjà vu washing over me. I looked through the peephole and my heart stopped. 2 police officers stood on my porch, their faces illuminated by the pale porch light. It was the same scene, the same time of night, the same beginning to the nightmare. I opened the door, already knowing. The female officer's expression was gentle but grave. "Mr. Gideon Hayes?" "Yes," I replied, my voice a whisper. "I'm Officer Miller," she said, and I realized with a jolt it was the same older officer from that first night. His partner was new. "May we come in? It's about your ex-wife, Lorelei Hayes." "Oh." I led them into the living room, grateful that the kids were asleep upstairs, oblivious. "What's happened?" Officer Miller's kind, weary eyes met mine. "I'm very sorry to inform you, Mr. Hayes. Miss Hayes was involved in a single-vehicle accident earlier tonight on Lakeshore Drive. Her car went off the road and struck a concrete barrier." Is she okay?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from the somber finality in his voice. "She did not survive the crash, sir. The paramedics pronounced her dead at the scene." I sat down heavily on the couch, the news hitting me with the force of a physical impact. Despite the pain, despite the betrayal, I had never wished this. Never. "The initial investigation suggests she was heavily intoxicated," the other officer added softly. "Her blood alcohol level was more than 3 times the legal limit. She was traveling at a high rate of view when she lost control." They continued talking, explaining procedures, asking about next of kin, but their voices faded into a dull drone. My mind was racing, consumed by a single, devastating thought. How am I going to tell my children that their mother is gone? How would this final, irreversible act of self-destruction shape their memory of her? The anger, the betrayal. It all seemed so petty now in the face of this absolute, tragic finality. The war was over. And in the end, it felt like nobody had won. After the police left, I sat alone in the dark living room for a long time. The silence of the house was immense, a heavy blanket thick with unspoken grief, and the ghosts of what might have been. The woman I had loved, the woman I had hated, the mother of my children, she was gone, erased. All that remained was the wreckage she'd left behind, and the two sleeping children upstairs, whom I would have to guide through it. Before the kids woke up, my phone rang. It was Cassandra. Her voice was unrecognizable, shredded by sobs. "They found a note, Gideon," she managed to get out between gasps. "In her apartment. The police gave it to me. It's addressed to you and the kids. I think you need to see it." I drove to her house immediately. She met me at the door, her face pale and swollen, her usual fiery anger extinguished, replaced by a hollowed-out despair. She handed me a single, sealed envelope without meeting my eyes. Inside was a sheet of paper, covered in Lorelei's familiar, elegant handwriting, though the letters were uneven and slanted, evidence of the state she was in when she wrote it. "My dearest Gideon, Iris, and Milo, I know words can never undo what I've done or heal the pain I've caused. I've spent these last months trying to find a way forward, to rebuild something from the ashes of the world I burned down. But I can't seem to escape the weight of my mistakes. The emptiness is suffocating. Gideon, you were right about everything. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was good and real and worth fighting for. And I threw it all away for something hollow and destructive. Preston never loved me, I see that now. He only loved the idea of taking something that belonged to someone else. But even if he had, it wouldn't have justified what I did to you, to our children. You deserved a partner who honored you, not one who betrayed you with every breath. Iris and Milo, my beautiful, precious children, I am so sorry for the confusion and pain I have brought into your lives. You deserved a mother who put you first, who protected you from harm instead of becoming the source of it. Please, you must always know that my failures as a wife and as a person have nothing to do with my love for you. That love has always been the only real and pure thing in me, even when my actions didn't reflect it. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve it. But I want you all to know that I understand now, far too late, what I threw away. The emptiness I feel isn't because I lost a lover or a job. It's because I lost the only things that ever truly mattered. My family, my integrity, and your trust. I am sorry for everything. Lorelei. I read the note twice, the words a confession, an apology, and a goodbye all at once. They didn't erase the betrayal, but they revealed a clarity that Lorelei had never been able to show in life. It was a final, tragic act of taking responsibility. I folded the paper carefully and placed it back in the envelope. "Did you know she was this desperate?" Cassandra asked, her voice a hollow whisper. I shook my head, the guilt a cold, heavy stone in my gut. I knew she was struggling, but I didn't realize how deep her despair had gone. Could we have done more?" she wondered, not accusingly, but with the genuine, aching uncertainty of a survivor. "I don't know," I admitted honestly. Maybe. Or maybe this path was set in motion the moment she made that first choice, and every choice after that just led her further down it. We sat in silence for a moment, two people who had once been connected by marriage, now united only by our shared, complicated grief for the woman who was gone. Telling Iris and Milo was the hardest thing I have ever done. I gathered them on the living room couch, in the same spot where I had told them about the affair. Their reactions were as different as their personalities. Iris collapsed into my arms, her body racked with deep, gut-wrenching sobs. Milo went completely still and silent, his face a pale, unreadable mask of shock. Did she do it on purpose?" Iris asked through her tears, voicing the question that hung in the air. I chose my words carefully, wanting to give them the truth without burdening them with the full weight of it. "The police believe it was an accident, sweetheart, caused by her drinking. But she did leave a note for us that shows she was in a very dark and unhappy place." "Can we read it?" Milo asked, his first word since I'd broken the news. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "Yes," I said, pulling them closer. "When you're ready, it's for you as much as it was for me." The days that followed were a surreal blur of funeral arrangements, casseroles from well-meaning neighbors, and condolence calls from people who didn't know the full story. Lorelei's death had transformed her in their eyes, and in some ways, in the eyes of my children. She was no longer just the mother who had betrayed them. She was now a tragic figure, a victim of her own mistakes. At the funeral, I stood between Iris and Milo, a hand on each of their shoulders, a stoic pillar I did not feel. I accepted condolences, shook hands, and listened to people praise Lorelei's vivacity and talent, a sanitized eulogy for a complicated life. Preston Thorne did not attend. It was a small mercy for which I was grateful. As we stood by the graveside, the final prayers being said, I felt Iris slip her small hand into mine. "Dad," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the minister's words. "Are you okay?" I looked down at my daughter, my heart aching at her capacity for empathy, even in the midst of her own grief. "I'm focused on you and Milo right now," I deflected. "But you lost someone too," she insisted, her gaze unwavering. "Even after everything." Her insight, so simple and profound, broke through the dam of my own carefully controlled emotions. Unexpected tears welled in my eyes. "Yes, I did," I whispered back. "I lost the woman I married a long time ago. But today, I lost the mother of my children, and the future we were all supposed to have." Milo, overhearing us, moved closer, leaning his head against my arm. "Do you think she really meant what she wrote in the note, that she was sorry?" I put my arm around his shoulders, pulling him tight against me. "I do, buddy. I think in those final moments, she saw things clearly for the first time in a long, long time." I wish she had seen them sooner," he said, his voice finally cracking, "before everything fell apart." "Me too, buddy," I replied, my voice thick. "Me too." In the months that followed, the three of us found a new rhythm, a new normal, shaped by loss but not defined by it. We started grief counseling, both individually and as a family. We learned to talk about Lorelei, the good and the bad. We remembered her laughter, her love of bad 80s music, the way she made the best pancakes on Sunday mornings. And we also acknowledged the pain, the lies, and the sad, destructive choices that led to her end. One evening, about 6 months after the funeral, I found Iris sitting on the back porch, scrolling through old family photos on her phone. "You know what's weird?" she said as I sat down beside her. "I'm starting to forget what her voice sounded like." "Abu." I nodded, a familiar ache in my chest. "That happens, but we'll never forget who she was, the good parts, and the rest of it. It's all part of her story, our story." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "I miss who she used to be, before all of this." "Me too," I admitted, "but I'm so grateful for what we still have. Right here, just us." We sat there in the comfortable silence, watching the sun set, painting the sky in strokes of orange and purple. My journey had never been about forgiveness. I realize that now. It had been about truth, about protecting my children, about finding a way to stand with dignity in the rubble of my life. Lorelei's betrayal had shattered our family, and her death had complicated our healing. But in the midst of the pain, we had found a fierce, unbreakable resilience. I had learned that some breaks can't be mended, that some trust can't be rebuilt, and that some choices change the course of our lives forever. But I had also learned that even after the most profound loss, life continues. The sun sets, and then it rises again. And with enough courage and honesty, so can we.